You know why I really love Nick Hood as a minister? I watched his father do it, and he took over for the church, and he was one of us, but he really turned out to be a great minister. I know it's hard, and that's something that I know that all ministers may not be doing what they're doing because for the right reasons, but I know it's hard. I know he's a beautiful man, and we've been knowing each other for over 50 years. I believe in him. He's inspired me in so many ways to do what I'm doing and try to be the best at it. Make sure you watch Nick Hood's ministries. You'll never be the same.
Welcome to Nicholas Hood III Ministries, a ministry of hope, spiritual inspiration, personal power guided by Christian love. May the power of God's Holy Spirit fall upon you as you sit back and enjoy today's program. I introduce you now to Pastor Nicholas Hood III.
You know, I'm still a pastor of a church, and one of the, pastors do all kind of things. But, we visit the sick, we bury the dead, we marry people, preach on Sundays, sometime other days of the week. But one of the things that I also do as a pastor is I lead Bible studies. And I'm in the midst of a Bible series right now at my church, really dedicated to men. It's called The Spiritual Man. But frankly, it just as well could be entitled The Spiritual Woman, or the spiritual man and a spiritual woman. And what I'd like to do for a few moments today is to share with you part of what I'm doing at my church through this Bible discussion series. And I would even invite you, those who are looking at this, if you want to know more, you want to join in, you can join in distance-wide, wherever you are. We're also beaming it online through Zoom. And if you want to know that, just call the number that's on the screen behind you and, leave me a message. I'll be happy to send you the Zoom link. But I want to walk you through this. I am convinced that Jesus Christ came to earth for really two reasons. Number one, Jesus came that you and I might live better lives. Now, some people would argue about that and say, no, Jesus came to prepare for us the kingdom of God, that we might live eternally in heaven. And yes, Jesus did come that you and I might have everlasting life. And that is the glorious eternal prize of the Lord. But Jesus also came, the thing that electrified people in the time of Jesus is he said, come drink from a fountain that never will run dry. Everyone who eats of this bread will never be hungry. Jesus came to show you and me how to live better lives. And what I have been telling my church is that if you and I are to really strive for this life, this glorious life that Jesus has prepared for us, there are two blessings. One is how to live this life to the best of your ability, and two, how to prepare yourself for life everlasting. And so today I want to talk about what does it mean to be the spiritual man? What does it mean to be a spiritual woman? You can live life without being spiritual. But if you want to live the best possible life, you have to figure out how to draw upon God's Spirit that is already within you. We hear the Apostle Paul saying in 1 Corinthians chapter 3 and verse 6, actually chapter 3 and chapter 6, verse 19. He says it in different ways. He says, do you not know that you are the temple of God? God's temple resides in you. And What Jesus is saying through Paul is that you and I have been born spiritual bodies. Your whole essence is spiritual. But very often we ignore that. And when Paul tells the church that you are the temple of God, he's not saying that you are a temple, but the temple of God resides within you. And if you and I are to be spiritual beings, the spiritual man, the spiritual woman, we've got to open that spirit. We've got to tap into that spirit so that we can enjoy the spirit, so that we can be led by the spirit, so we can be fed by the spirit, we can flourish by the spirit. And to me, the best men and the best women are people who have figured out how to draw deep down in that well within their souls to exemplify what God really has ordained for each of us. And so how do we tap in to this Spirit of God? Number one, acknowledge God in all ways. Acknowledge the Lord. And what happens when you acknowledge the Lord? When you acknowledge the Lord, that means that you are giving credit to God. And if you give credit to God for your blessings, you give credit to God for every good and perfect gift that you receive, if you give credit to God when you obviously have done something well, when you figured out a problem, a solution to a problem, if you pause for a moment and just to thank God, you are tapping in to God's Spirit. And it is so important to acknowledge God in all ways. When I'm driving in the car and somebody nearly hits me, I thank the Lord. When I find that there's a blessing that somebody has done for me, an opportunity that has been given to me, the very fact I hear every week from people just like you, from around the country, from the East Coast to the West Coast, from the South to the North, there are people who call me every weekend. And they tell me what a blessing it is to watch this worship service. And, it makes me feel good. But number two, guess what I do? I thank the Lord because I know it's not me. And a lot of people, they call me and they say, I just really enjoy hearing what you're saying. I feel like you're talking to me. I feel like you're believable. And I said, well, I try to be believable. But I acknowledge God because I know it's not me, but it's God talking through me. Not only if we're to be the spiritual man and the spiritual woman, not only does it start with acknowledging God, but in our spirituality, we need to put everything back on God. And so if I acknowledge God, that means that I'm going to pray to God. I don't pray to the devil. I don't pray to the rock. I don't pray to the bird in the sky. I pray through Jesus Christ. And I pray to God because I believe in the Lord. And the very fact that I'm praying to God through Christ makes me a spiritual person. I try to live the way God has taught us to live. And if you try to live as God has taught us to live, and what does God tell us about living? God tells us, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Think about what that does to you, particularly when somebody has been mean to you, particularly when somebody has tried to cheat you out of your inheritance, particularly when somebody has tried to rob you. But if you love your neighbor as you love your very self, it's going to transform your inner being, your inner self, and you become a more spiritual man, a more spiritual woman. What does it mean to forgive somebody who's been mean to you? What does it mean to give another person another chance? And what does that forgiveness really look like? But to go through the effort of forgiveness, particularly when somebody has undercut you, when somebody has done you wrong, when somebody has tried to hurt you, and you do not respond in kind, but you want to forgive them. One, it's confounding to the person who's offended you, but more important than confounding your adversary, the fact that you go through the spiritual regimen of trying to be one with Christ, even when somebody's done you wrong. What you'll find is that Christ will descend upon you like a curtain descending upon a stage, the very stage of life. And you'll find that, as Paul would say, your body is no longer your own because you are a spiritual being. These are steps, my friends, that we take in this whole effort to become a better equipped spiritual man, a better equipped spiritual woman. I think about people. I know there's some looking at this. Some people have called me and told me that they have a good relationship with their children. Others have called me and told me, they said, my family's not right. There are people who really don't act the way that I want them to act. I may have a son or a daughter who's not acting the way that I want them to act. A son or a daughter or a grandchild who's draining on me. But I maintain, if you seek to love somebody who's draining on you, somebody who's dragging you down, if you seek to try to find a way to be positive, try to find a way to be encouraging, what you will find is that you become bigger than life because God's Spirit is already residing within you. And as you become bigger than life, my friends, your forgiveness is humbling. Your love is humbling. Your grace and your mercy is humbling. And the more you extend yourself in love, what you will find is that you become literally the spiritual man or spiritual woman. You can be a good man and a good woman without being spiritual. But if you strive to be this spiritual self that Jesus Christ has called you and me to be, what you will find is that you become bigger than life. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this when we come back. I want you to think about being a spiritual man and a spiritual woman, and I'll be right back.
America used to be considered a godly country. It doesn't seem to be that way to me now. And I don't mean to be disrespectful or anything, but it's so many things they're okaying for the wrong reasons. There's not godly reason. People need to really open up the Bible, the Bible, and look in it and really get it into their heart. And this, the way Reverend Hood is doing this is a comfortable way. It's not forcing anything on people. It's a comfortable way and a loving way for it to continue to move in that direction.
The way Reverend Hood presents it, you can understand it, and it makes you want to delve into the Bible even more so that you can see more, because it seems like the program goes off too fast. We need the bread of life.
We really do.
These days we need it more than ever, and Reverend Hood's ministry on TV is giving us our bread.
And the point that I'm making is that in everybody's life, at some point, there's a plan B. God is talking to us every step of the way. God is trying to show you something every step of the way. When things seem to be going wrong, that's God's way of opening another door. I am convinced that God has been directing me every step of my life.
On the Word Network.
So let me break this whole concept of being a spiritual man, a spiritual woman. Let me break it down a little further. One of the things that the Apostle Paul tells us in the book of Galatians, the 5th chapter, is that there's something he calls the fruits of the Spirit. And again, I think the fruits of the Spirit is just like the ultimate blessing of God. The fruit of the Spirit is what you receive when you seek to be a spiritual man, a spiritual woman. But the fruits of the Spirit is also something you can try to exemplify in your life. And I believe that when a person makes the effort to exemplify the fruits of the Spirit, the fruits of the Spirit becomes a part of you. So for example, there are these 9 fruit of the Spirit. Paul says, if you have the fruit of the Spirit, what are they? He says they're love, their peace, their kindness, I'm getting them out of order, self-control, forbearance. All of these are the fruit of the Spirit. And that if a person strives for this fruit of the Spirit, then it becomes part of you. And I don't know if any of you have ever felt this way either about yourself, or maybe you've met somebody who in their life exemplified the fruit of the Spirit. Somebody who was just patient, somebody who was kind, somebody who was loving, somebody who had self-control, somebody who's forgiving. When you find somebody like that, they are literally, as Paul would say in 1 Corinthians, their body is no longer their own because they are on another level. And, it's hard to forgive somebody. I think one of the things that has been fascinating with the African American community coming out of slavery is that, for better or for worse, and not everybody's crazy about this, but the African American was introduced to Christianity by slave owners. And in being introduced to Christianity, it enabled, I think, the African American community to figure out how do we not only survive America and survive slavery, but how can we thrive in this culture? How can we thrive in a bloodthirsty culture? And, it hadn't been perfect. But what you found is that I think for a lot of people's estimation, the African American has done a lot better than you might imagine. I mean, most of us can't go past 3 or 4 generations in our own family life because of slavery. We can't really trace our roots all the way back to whatever nation we were from or what tribe we were from in Africa, but we have still survived it. And so I encourage you to strive for the fruits of the Spirit. If you really want to be a spiritual man, a spiritual woman, ask yourself, it's one thing to succeed academically. It's one thing to succeed professionally. But you can have professional achievement. You can have personal achievement where you make a lot of money, you acquire a lot of things, but you're really not living the best life until you become the best spiritual man or the best spiritual woman that you can. Now, in my church, I'm doing this 5-week series on the spiritual man. As I was saying at the outset, I could just as easily talk about what does it mean to be a spiritual woman? What does it mean to be a spiritual man as a leader or a spiritual woman as a leader? What does it mean to be a woman who's both spiritual and a leader? And one of the nice things in modern life in America, and this is for white or black, it doesn't matter who you are, is that we live in a society, in spite of all the rough edges, is trying to view women and men as equals. And in that process of being equals, if we are to be spiritually guided women, spiritually guided men, that means that our lives are more than simply being a woman or being a man, but that we try to exude and to exemplify God in all that we do. It means that we acknowledge God, we pray to God, we try to walk and talk like what we've read about in the Bible. We try to forgive. I was starting to say at the beginning of this program, in the effort to forgive somebody who's really done you wrong, somebody who's hurt your feelings, somebody who disappointed you, somebody who you just knew couldn't do the kind of thing that they did to you, but they did it anyway. And what does that forgiveness look like? Some people say, well, I forgive and I can't forget. There are other people who say, well, you can't forgive unless you forget. But the truth of the matter is you can try to forget what somebody has done to you, but what does that forgiveness really look like? Can I go back to a place in our relationship when it was pristine? Can I really go back to a time in our love when we trusted each other, when you have broken trust, or worse, I've broken trust? How do you pick up a relationship when it's fallen to the gutter? In married life, the married couple at some point sometimes would just say, even like Job, though you slay me, I will still trust you, or I'm going to give you another chance, and that's great. I think we strive to be the best man, the best woman in that process. But the reality is that forgiveness can be very, very difficult. But if you strive to be forgiving, if you strive to be loving, if you strive to be kind, if you strive to be patient with somebody, even though they get on your last nerve, if you strive to be merciful and gracious, and strive to give a person another chance, what you find is that you become a better person. And so to the grandparent who's looking at this program right now, I encourage you, strive to be the spiritual grandparent. Your grandchild needs you. For the person looking at this right now, who's the mother or the father, strive to be a spiritual mother, a spiritual father. It doesn't mean you are going to be perfect, but try to be. Try to have self-control. Try to be forgiving. Try to be loving. Try to be patient when somebody gets on your last nerve. And in the process, it will make you a better person. Through my life, I'm going to be honest, I really try to develop that spirituality in all ways. One of the things that I do in life is I find myself praying for people all the time. I pray now for strangers. I had the most amazing experience 2 weeks ago, Ash Wednesday. I got a call right before going into Ash Wednesday worship that it appeared that my neighbor had had a medical episode. He backed out of his driveway and ran his car into a tree on my front lawn, a big pine tree. It was probably a 100-year-old tree. He knocked the tree down, and the poor neighbor died right in my front yard, right in front of the house, in his truck. And, it's interesting. I found myself praying for this neighbor. He was very kind to me. He's the kind of neighbor who, I hate to think of myself as getting older, but I am 74. Maybe, with my gray hair, he looked at me and said, well, Reverend Hood needs help. And so on a given Thursday, our trash pickup day is Friday. If I didn't get the garbage can out early enough, my neighbor would roll my garbage can down the driveway for me. And I just think that the guy was a great neighbor and, never caused me any problems. We got along very well. But when it looked like he was dating a woman seriously, I found myself praying for him and the young lady every day. And I would pray for them twice a day. I'd pray for them in the morning when I was driving my car out the driveway, and I'd pray for them at night when I was coming back up the driveway. And my prayer was that they would be happy, that neither of them would be disappointed. And unfortunately, my neighbor died. And, I was telling this true story to my producer, Brother John Hill, of this program. And he said, Nick, Reverend, you prayed for the guy's wife not to be disappointed? I said, yes. I said, and he died? And I said, yes. And you know what John Hill said? He said, Reverend, don't pray for me. He said, don't pray that prayer for me because I don't want anything to happen to me like what happened to that poor guy. And I said, well, it certainly wasn't my intention that he would die. But the point that I'm making is that looking at my neighbor and what it appeared that he was trying to achieve in life helped me to be a more spiritual person because it forced me to pray to God. And I encourage you, find somebody to pray for. And in the process of looking for somebody to pray for me. I want you to pray for this ministry. Wonderful things are happening right now in this ministry. I'm so grateful for the people who are supporting, and I believe they're praying for me, just like I'm praying for you. And so today, I hope to encourage you to strive to be a spiritual man and a spiritual woman. And I want you to know I'm praying for you in that process. God bless.
You know why I really love Nick Hood as a minister? I watched his father do it, and he took over for the church. And he was one of us, but he really turned out to be a great minister. I know it's hard, and that's something that I know that all ministers may not be doing what they're doing because for the right reasons, but I know it's hard. I know he's a beautiful man, and we've been knowing each other for over 50 years. I believe in him. He's inspired me in so many ways to do what I'm doing and try to be the best at it. Make sure you watch Nick Hood's ministries. You'll never be the same.
We hope you've been blessed in a powerful way. Just knowing you took the time to watch today's broadcast is a great encouragement to Pastor Nick Hood. If this broadcast has been a blessing to you, we ask that you mail a tax-free donation to Nicholas Hood Ministries at 4535 Chrysler Drive, Detroit, Michigan, 48201.
The point that I'm making is that in everybody's life, at some point, there's a plan B. God is talking to us every step of the way. God is trying to show you.